Hi, everybody. So I want to keep talking to you more about pivot tables and do a little bit more with formatting here as well. So again, I'm going to kind of follow along with your text to go through some of the features there. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new pivot table this time. So I'm going to go back to my media log and let me just scroll up for a second there. And I'm just going to select again the corner of that table to let Excel know that this is, the information I want to use. I'm going to go back to insert. I'm going to insert a pivot table. Again, we're verifying that we have the right data selected. So it is the media table. And I'm going to go to an existing worksheet. And this time we're going to put our pivot tables on our dashboard. So I'm going to go to our dashboard here and I'm going to hit cell J11 is where we want to start. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And of course, now we're going to do some editing or just some basic filling in on this table, right? So the first thing I'd like to do is I am going to rename it here. So let's rename this table engagement pivot. And then I'm going to drag the following. I'm going to drag views to my values box. I'm going to drag likes to my values box, comments to my values box, shares to my values box, and engagements. Now, if I scroll down here, you can see my pivot table start to form. And again, it defaults to sum. So when I'm using values, it does default to sum. It does create columns here as well because I have so many different values now, right? I'm not just doing one thing. I'm putting in multiple here. Your book does want us to use the correct order though. So if I look here, it wants me to have views first, which I do. And then it wants me to have likes second. So I do need to go up down to likes here, and I'm going to actually move it to the beginning first. And then I'm going to just move it down one. All right, so now I have views and then likes, which is what I want. Next, I wanted to have comments. Engagement should be at the end, so I'm going to move that one to the end. And again, shares should not be next, so I'm going to move that one down as well. All right, so let's see. So I have views, likes, comments, shares, and engagements. And that looks good there. And you can see the order changed as well as I was editing and changing the order. So sometimes order does matter in your presentation and how it breaks down the data. Okay, so again, it does create this sum values chart, which kind of tells Excel to put everything in columns. If you don't like the columns, you actually can take this new label here and move it to rows, which I think works a little bit nicer. I kind of like it that way. So each of these has their own rows instead. Otherwise, if I leave it in columns, the data will go down the column. So the first column would be views and then likes and then comments. If you prefer to read it the other way, we can move that field to rows, and then all my information about views will go on a row, likes will go on a row, comments, shares, engagements, and so on. I'm going to also drag the site field into my columns instead. So I will make my columns Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and then leave my rows as views, likes, comments, shares, engagements, and so on. So for instance, here, this first piece, 153,677 would be the sum of all the views on Facebook. Or this 121,000 here would be the views on Instagram, right? So it's my total views on Instagram. And then going across here, this 281,000 are all the views all together for this particular company, for instance. So again, we're breaking down multiple calculations here by site in this case. Now I can also go in and change some of my labels here. Now, when you're working in a pivot table, I do not recommend using the home feature and doing your editing up here, because what happens is as you adjust your table, the formatting doesn't always stay fixed when you edit using the home feature. So there are ways to edit within the table. So that's what we're going to do next here. So I'm going to start by just clicking the sum of views, and I'm going to go ahead and double click that. And then I see this extra field setting opens up. And this allows me to do some customizing. So the first thing I can do is I can change the format here. So notice how there's no commas or anything, which just makes it a little bit hard to read. So I can go into number format, and then I can go ahead and actually change how I want that row to be formatted. So maybe I want it as a number. Maybe I would like no decimal places. And I can click use 1000 separator, which puts those commas in. And then I can click OK. I can also change the name here. So maybe I don't want to write sum of views. Maybe instead I'm going to write, your book suggests to make this as viewed, but you can write something different, total views or whatever makes the most sense. And then I click OK, and you can see that that row updated. And I can go ahead and I can change the other ones too. So again, I'm not going to do all of them, but I would double click sum of likes. I can change this. So let's just call this liked. And then I can change my number format there as well. And again, maybe I'd like to use no decimal places and make sure I put that 1000 separator in. If I want to use a currency or a counting format or a percentage, I can do all of that too. So I have all of those features. And again, when I'm ready, I would just hit OK, and it will update that row. And you can do the other rows as well and see how they get formatted. So you want to go ahead and engage that way with your table rather than trying to do the home feature instead. All right, let's say I want to make a few pivot tables, which is not uncommon, right? So this pivot table is great. It lets me look at views, likes, comments, shares, engagements by media site, right, by the different sites, but maybe I want to break out more data. So it would not be uncommon to make multiple tables to make it easy to look at. Now you can do the same thing again. You could go back to your media log, hit the corner and hit insert again, but you can also copy and paste. So what I could do here is I could copy my table. And again, I'm just going to hit right click and copy. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And again, I can click right click and paste, or I can go ahead and just Control V, for instance, and it pastes my table here. Now, obviously, I want to do different things with it, but it's already there. So now I can just sort of edit it and adjust what I want to here. The other thing I could do too, if I want to start fresh, is I can go to my pivot table analyze. If I go to actions and I hit clear and hit clear all, it will clear the entire pivot table, which is fine if that's what you want. Or if you just want to make a couple quick changes, you can go ahead and do that too. So here I cleared the whole thing. I'm going to rename this one. Let's see, total posts pivot, just following along with your text. All right, and we're going to use the site field in the columns area. And we're going to use the post field in the values area. So here we're focusing on posts. The count of posts sounds kind of weird. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to total posts. And again, I can use capitals, lowercase, whatever I want. And if I need to change the number format there, I can, and so on. So I can, again, create a new pivot table here. This one, I just want to focus on total posts, looking at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then our grand total, right? So there's another little pivot table that is helpful. All right, let's make another one. So I'm just going to Control C to copy. And then I'm going to come down here and hit Control V again. And I'm just going to double click somewhere else on the screen and then go back to the table that I want. And now I'm not going to clear everything here. I'm just going to really edit it instead. So I'm going to take total posts out, and instead I'm going to focus on engagement. And I'm going to use the engagement rate here as my value. So again, I would want to rename this. So I could go to my pivot table. I can rename this. Let's see, we're going to name this one as engaged rate, right? So you can pivot, call it whatever you want. I'm going to double click here on the sum of engagement so I can do some editing there. Sum of engagement rate sounds kind of weird. Also, I don't know that it's very helpful to sum the engagement rate here, right? A rate is typically a percentage. So I really want to fix this formatting here. I don't really want to sum as well. I don't want to sum my rates or my percents. I would really love to know the average. So for my engagement rate, I kind of want to know the average engagement rate instead. So how do I change that? So when I double click that row, if I don't want it to use a sum or count, which again are the two that it defaults to, it uses sum for numbers, count if it's not numbers, if it's text information. So I can hit average here instead, and it's going to compute an average. And then maybe I'm going to rename this as engaged rate. And I would love this to show as a percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and click the percentage. Again, I can change the number of decimal places if I want to here. Click OK. And when I am ready, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to do here. We can just hit OK, and that will update. So that's how you can go ahead and change. If you don't want your values to be sums, you can change them. You have to kind of put them in as sums first, and then you can go here, double click, and you can change the function right here. So you have sum, count, average, max, min, product, standard deviation, and variance as very common functions that get used. So that's why these are given to you here. So again, if you're not just doing summing or counting, average is another popular one, of course, or mins and maxes. So you can change that format after you already insert the pivot table there. All right. So looking here, I can see that, Instagram definitely has the highest engagement rate, but my average overall is a little under 1%. You can move pivot tables too. So an easy way to move a pivot table is to just cut and paste it, if I'm being honest. You can also click and drag it, although sometimes I have a hard time with that with my laptop if I'm not using a separate mouse. So if you do want to move this, again, cut and paste, selecting the whole thing, cutting and pasting it to move it is an easy way to do that. Or if you do want to move it elsewhere, you can do that too. Just let me get out of this for a second. So if you go up here to actions as well, you will see the option to move the table. And that's helpful if you need to move it to a different sheet. So if you're moving on the same sheet, you can just do quick cut and paste, although you could cut and paste anyway. But if you want to move it to a new worksheet or a different worksheet, then the actions button there with the option to move is really helpful too. So you can make those changes as well.